Ka tangi te titi, ka tangi te kaka, ka tangi hoki a hau, te hei Māori o rā. Ko te mihi tuatahi ki ngā maunga, ngā awa me ngā wahi tapu o tēnei rohi. Kei te mihi, kei te mihi, kei te mihi. Ko te mihi tuarua ki te mana whenua o tēnei rohi, e rapu wai, waitaha, ka te mamoi, me kaitahu whānui. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ia rangatira mā, e hoa mā, nau mai, piki mai, kake mai. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cam McCracken. I'm the director of the Dunedin Public Art Gallery, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this very special event where we have a unique opportunity to meet and celebrate the 2024 Fellows of the University of Otago, Ōtākau Whaikaihu Waka. If I do my job properly, this panel discussion will introduce you to the extraordinary talents, the creative practices of our fellows, providing an insight into their artistic journeys thus far and their plans and outcomes for their respective fellowship. I'd just like to acknowledge the University of Otago and other support institutions and partners for putting on these fellowships, for nurturing them over the years, and just acknowledge the important part that they play, not only on campus, but in the city. These fellowships support and encourage the arts, but also foster a vibrant connection between the university and the wider community. I'm going to introduce each of our panelists and fellows this afternoon one by one, and they've sat in the wrong places, but I didn't place them. But can I start? And I just want to mention the fellowship, the individual fellowships themselves as well. And I'm going to start with Dr. Simon Eastwood and the Mozart Fellowship, which was established in 1969 to support and encourage composers of music, aiding their artistic practice and integrating them into university life. As I said, we're very honoured to have Dr. Simon Eastwood as the 2024 Mozart Fellow. Simon is a distinguished composer, bass player, and music educator. He has a diverse practice which spans orchestral and chamber works, electronic pieces, as well as improvisation. He studied composition at the Royal Academy of Music in London and the New Zealand School of Music in Wellington. His recent work focuses on reinterpretive collaboration with non-classical musicians, poets, painters, and video artists. Next, we have the Carolyn Plummer Fellowship in Community Dance, and our fellow is Marcella Geisha. The fellowship was established in 2003 to support community dance practitioners, teachers, and researchers, and it's open to New Zealand and international applicants who propose programs or projects aligning with Caroline's vision for community dance. Marcella Geisha is a freelance choreographer, performer, and curator. Marcella is the founder and artistic director of Lake Studios Berlin, a dance residency and performance venue. She holds degrees in dance from Ohio State University and Codarts in Rotterdam, and has been awarded numerous artistic residencies and has performed with various and numerous European dance companies. She's an experienced improviser and has collaborated extensively with live musicians. The Robert Burns Fellowship was established, it is the oldest of the fellowship, established in 1958 and is New Zealand's premier literary residency, commemorating the bicentenary of the birth of the bard Robbie Burns, the Scottish poet and lyricist. It is open to New Zealand-based writers of poetry, drama, fiction, biography, autobiography, essays, or literary criticism. Our Burns Fellow at the end is Marcella Nyman, a Taranaki-based writer of Finnish heritage, Marcella is an award-winning author of fiction, non-fiction, and poetry. Marcella has a PhD in creative writing with a focus on women's creativity in Vanuatu. Welcome to you, Michaela. And just not finally, because we have another fellowship, but no fellow to introduce, but our next fellow to introduce is the College of Education Creative New Zealand Children's Writer-in-Residence, which is Fiana Tuakoi. Now, the Children's Writer-in-Residence Fellowship was established in 1992 to support children's writers, and has the support of the College of Education Creative New Zealand and the Robert Lord Trust. To introduce Fiana, she is based in Kiriroa, Hamilton, and has a strong background in educational writing. She's authored around 230 titles, including books, readers, plays, articles, poetry, and radio stories. Fiana's work is often centred around Tongan Palangi families, has been widely recognised and translated into more than 13 languages. And just finally, we don't have the fellows present, but I want to acknowledge the Frances Hodgkins Fellowship, established in 1962, supporting a visual artist to live and work in Ōtepoti for 12 months, named after the internationally renowned Dunedin-born artist Frances Hodgkins, daughter of the founder of this art gallery. The fellows this year are Miranda Bellamy and Amanda Furter, who are partners and artistic collaborators known for their research-driven processes and interdisciplinary outcomes. Amanda and Miranda divide their time between New Zealand and Canada, and it is in Canada that they're travelling at the moment and unable to be with us. We do have a short video, and I'll figure out when we're going to play that sometime this afternoon. Again, this is an opportunity for us to celebrate the incredible talents of our 2024 fellows. Their creative practices enrich not only the University of Otago, but the wider community. We are excited to meet them and to hear about the projects that they will undertake or have undertaken during their residencies. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Simon Eastwood, Marcella Geisha, Michaela Nyman, and Fiana Tuakoi. Let's give them a round of applause. Firstly, just congratulations to all of you. Receiving this fellowship, is obviously a great marker of your achievements to date. And so we congratulate you and are so happy to have you in our community. Can I start with a bit of an icebreaker? I'm going to stop talking now. I've talked for about 15 minutes. I want to throw it over to you, and let's hear from you with a bit of an icebreaker where you can talk a little bit about yourselves, specifically what has been the path to get you to this point in your career. And if each of you could pick up a microphone and answer one by one, that'd be great.
It takes a moment. All right. Hello, I'm Marcella. I'm the dance fellow in community dance. The path to this place. I'm a choreographer and a dancer, as you heard, and I've been also, I've opened a dance space in Berlin, and as you can imagine, in most places in the world, there's not a lot of money to support things from scratch right when you begin. So the moment that we opened the space, we had to do most of the work on our own, and so I was doing a lot of construction work and other kinds of jobs in order to facilitate and to create a dance floor, and then after that facilitate dance workshops and dance classes, and further on then with funding also festivals and other formats and forums and things like this. All the time also doing my own practice and teaching around. And what has been the kind of through line is that I've learned how it's not just the movement what's important, but how you frame the movement and how we allow other people to see what that movement is through what lens we put it. So all the formats I've tried to develop in the Lake Studios are very much about changing the way that we see dance and how dance can be a part of everybody's life, and it's not an elite thing. So it's, for me, it's very important to make it as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. And so getting this fellowship in community dance has actually been a really big support and a big turning point also for me in my own work, because I've been able to give classes and work with so many diverse kinds of people. And I've just through asking them different questions about where they find joy and interest in movement in their life, it also has changed a lot how I structure my dance classes, because I try to make everything that I do very relatable to movement, like very known movements to you, like things like pushing or pulling, like everyone understands that, and also what is walking, what is traveling, and so that is always the base. I've kind of maybe said too many things already, but the fact that it is a fellowship in community dance has been very meaningful, because it's really helped me to broaden the term of what dance is for my own work as well. So it's been this exchange, very big exchange process, and I feel very supported to have this time away also from my space, to be able to connect to as all these different people, and you are also included in that, so I'm very excited about meeting you.
Simon, tell us about your pathway.
Kia ora. I've always had a fairly eclectic approach to music making. In high school I played various instruments and played various styles, like from rock bands to jazz and classical things, and so that sort of continued on when I went to university and studied composition. At some point I was very fortunate to be able to go to London to study at the Royal Academy of Music, and they really pushed us by throwing all kinds of different projects at us very quickly. And a lot of those projects were collaborative projects, which was something I thoroughly enjoyed, because I really appreciated the way that another person can push you in new directions and to help you to discover things that you wouldn't on your own through a creative process. So when I came back, that sort of became my main focus for a few years, which was to do these sort of long distance collaborations with people that I'd met all around the world, and it was an incredibly rewarding process to just basically explore those different ways, and just to use the community in a sense, the way that we're connected to one another. Creatives, we often need to remember that we are connected to each other in a very intimate ways, and I think that was a very important way to explore that. And since then I, like Marcella, had to do a lot of different things for a while, so I had about sort of 5 different jobs teaching various things, from swimming to orchestration and conducting, and a little bit of uni teaching. But so that's something I like to call the freelance juggle. So you're always kind of doing lots of different things, which is incredibly exciting and varied, but sometimes leaves you wanting more time to work on your own thing, which brings me here, which has been a fantastic experience to have time. It's one of the greatest gifts I think you can give any artist.
Fiona?
Kia ora koutou. E mihi ana ki ngā mana whenua, ko Fiona Tuakoia hau. I'm not like everybody else. When my degree is in education, history and maths, it's not overly useful for writing. I started writing because when our 4 kids were preschoolers, I couldn't find books by or about Tongan authors. And I don't know if you've come across Dr. Rudine Sims-Bishop. She's an American researcher. She says that books can be mirrors that reflect your lives back to you, or windows that let you see into other realities, or sliding glass doors that you can use to enter other worlds. Well, for our kids, books were just never mirrors. So I basically started writing so that they'd be able to see themselves in books. And even now, the main thing I do is that I write about things that make sense to us as a family. So I've heard people say sometimes that I'm writing Tongan things or I'm writing for Pacific people. None of that's true. I'm just writing our experience so that my kids and kids like them can see themselves in books. And I have this kind of master plan that should any of our kids ever produce a grandchild instead of a grand dog, they'll be able to read Tongan writers. So, and I think you can't do that if you never see yourself in a book and you don't think that books are for you. So that's why I started.
Kia ora. And Michaela.
Kia ora. Yes, my name is Michaela Nyman, and I come from some small islands between Finland and Sweden, which is actually the largest archipelago in the Northern Hemisphere. And we were granted independence, or not independence, autonomy by the League of Nations about 100 years ago, and it was a huge celebration in my island. So we are very proud of our culture and heritage and being part of Finland, but we have our own language, which is Swedish. And if you come from a small island nation, you have to leave to go somewhere else because we don't have universities. You have to find education, maybe a job, maybe even a partner that you didn't go to school and kindy with. And so I ended up here because I met a man from Taranaki. But writing has always been really important, and storytelling for me. My grandfather was a very unusual man who ended up in as a priest because he couldn't go into theater. His very Lutheran parents didn't allow him, and he thought the closest he could get to having some theater and drama and bling and some lovely, coats and whatnot was to go into priesthood. And he was very controversial, so he was exiled as far away as the church could get him, and that was to the Åland Islands, where he kind of started putting flowers on the altar, writing poetry, writing his community history and stuff. And my grandfather and I were very close. So we always had an exchange in letters, and later I became a journalist. But this storytelling and the need to get your stories out has always been with me. And this is why I also work with people in the Pacific, in Vanuatu specifically. And we have just had this amazing short story event, the microfiction storytelling. And I also believe that storytelling and writing your stories is for everyone. It's not an elitist thing. And English is my fourth language, so I'm very grateful to be here and to be a published writer. I'm a novelist, and I write non-fiction and poetry in English and Swedish. But if you are from a small island nation, who will read you if they don't understand your language? And if you are from a place where maybe the majority language takes over and the minority languages are not meant to be supported the same way, or they don't get the support, then maybe translation is your way to get out. Maybe you need to embrace a word language like French or Spanish or English to actually get a readership beyond your small borders. So yeah, I work in collaboration across borders, across art disciplines. I think it's really important. And this is a wonderful, wonderful, nurturing environment. To be in Dunedin is truly a gift, like Simon said, the gift of time, the gift of community, and the gift to just explore and do your stuff instead of having 100 contracts on the go and Creative New Zealand applications. And yeah, thank you.
Could I ask you all, firstly, thank you for that. Aren't we lucky? 4 of the most interesting people. Each of you have talked a little bit about your creative processes, but I'd like to invite you really just to unpack a little bit for us. What is your creative process involve? You can start at the other end of the table.
Okay. Mine involves a lot of walking. I love to be outside, and I do a lot of walking. And I think when I walk, the problem is that I actually should write down things as I walk, and I don't always have time. And so I forget by the time I get to the other end. And the next day, when I pass the same place, go through the same tree, little green belt, I think of the same thing, and it's very annoying. So I've started writing down. I have 3 notebooks on the go, and they are for different projects. And that's part of my process, to try to write down things, even if it's fragments, like my current second poetry collection, which was published in Finland in Swedish. That is a series of fragments, basically. It was built up over time, but collecting those fragments, weaving them together, then maybe introducing something else. You know, that's how something starts. It starts small. Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't make the green light go. I write for adults and kids, and I write fiction and non-fiction, and I write for the educational market and for the trade market, the sorts of things that are in bookshops and that. And for everything I write, it's exactly the same. I'll start with some sort of a vague idea, often a what-if question, where I really like things where you have 2 unlikely things put together. So, for example, my latest book, Lopini the Legend, started with the question, what if a perfectionist tried to succeed at failing? So that was my question. And then I just start writing. I don't plan in advance because I don't want to be writing from here. I want to be writing, from my cells kind of thing. And so the first words of the first draft of that book were literally something about someone who. So I wrote that and I just started. And at that point, I thought the main character might have been a girl. Turned out he was a boy. I didn't know his name was Lopini. I definitely didn't know he was a legend. That's all stuff I found out while I was writing. And I will just keep going till the end. When I get to the end, I go back and write the beginning. And then I edit it and craft it until it's how I want it to be. And I do that with everything, even with non-fiction. That's just how I do things. There will have been a lot of thinking, but it's not sort of conscious thinking in advance. My thinking process involves writing. So if I was at something like this sitting at your end, I'd be writing things down. If I'm looking very attentive, I'm daydreaming. So I just do the same thing for everything I do. And so far, so good. The only thing that was different actually for this, you had to put in a proposal, and that's back to front to how I work. So that was really weird because I had to say in advance what I was going to write, but I didn't know because I hadn't written it. So.
Kia ora. I kind of have 2 creative processes. One involves improvisation and being very in the moment. And that's very fast. I can sort of create something in basically as long as whatever it is I've created is. The issue with that sometimes arises that the way that people improvise is that they're using like a repertoire. So you have a whole bunch of tricks that you sort of bring out. And a lot of the time you want to introduce new tricks, which brings me to the second creative process, which is very, very slow and methodical and sometimes a little bit mathematical, where I will sort of develop a concept over time and just sort of move one little bit. It's a bit like knitting or something. You're just kind of like one stitch at a time, and eventually you come up with something, and the whole reveals itself. But really, and occasionally there might be a mix between those two. It really depends on the project, who you're working with, what the concept is that either you start with or arises out of the process. So really it kind of varies, but it's sort of usually oscillates between those 2 kind of extremes.
It's always nice to hear what other people say before you speak, because it always adds something. And it reminds me that I actually also have 2 creative processes. The one where I have to be in the moment and respond to everything around, so to be really present here and now when improvising, but also when teaching a class, for example. And the other one being just my other creative process begins by paying attention and just watching things around me, movement, life emerging, and just seeing beautiful moments that I would then somehow like to share. So the next step in that process would be to set up structures to allow similar types of occurrences to happen again, and maybe not knowing exactly which movement is going to be, but to set up the structure in such a way that the people involved to create that performance moment will go through similar processes where we can watch people working rather than trying to express something, but people trying to figure something out through movement. And I find that is very interesting as when you're watching someone figure out a physical problem, you really get an eye into who they are. Instead of the person saying who they are, you see them actually engaged and working. So the second of the process is creating these structures, and the structure, as I've come here, is that I've had to also create a structure within the community. So I've set up community dance classes, which are open for anyone to join Wednesdays and Fridays from 9:30 to 11, to get to know people, but also to engage in the practice. And through these community classes, I'm like creating wider and wider networks. It started very small with Anna, who's sitting here in the audience. She's putting together the Dance Otapoti newsletter, and I'm very grateful to you, actually, for that. But she started a little network, and it grows and grows and grows. And then through that, I'm reaching out to a lot of different kind of people to participate in a final performance with 24 very diverse participants, where we're going to see each of them figuring out a little something through a movement solo. I guess I could keep talking about it, but yeah, I think it's maybe enough.
My next question really to all of you, and you probably started to answer this, but a number of you have mentioned other participants in your practice. So what is the role of others, be they collaborators, artists, or creatives, from other, genres, readers, audience, people commissioning your work? What is the interface between you and others, in your process? Do you want to start, Simon?
Sure. Yeah, well, that's something I spent quite a lot of time thinking about. And the main word which sort of came up was the idea of a provocation. And a provocation is something that pushes you into a different train of thought than you would be if you were on your own path. And so for other people, for that are a very important way of keeping me out of my little loops, my little circles that I can get stuck in. So that could come in a number of different ways. It could be someone that's actually working on the project with you. It could be someone that's given you feedback. It could be a commissioner. So a commissioner would kind of sets the boundaries of your work. Sometimes if you can do anything, the question becomes, what do you do? So having that box is in itself a sort of a provocation that you inevitably find yourself kind of pushing up against in various ways. Yeah, so that's how. Do you agree?
Whichever way you want.
Writing's a thing I do in a room on my own, but it's always a collaboration. Even just with coming up with the initial idea, you have ideas, you're kind of already standing on the shoulders of other people because you have ideas because of the world you live in, the people you interact with, the things you've read, the things that people have said before you were even born. Nature, anything. It's always a collaboration. You're never being a genius on your own. It's just not a thing. So the idea is collaborative. Then, and also sometimes I'm commissioned to write things, and so that's the same as what Simon was saying, sometimes you get pages and pages of things that you have to consider when you're writing. When you're writing for educational things, you have to consider supporting the child to decode as well as everything else. once you've written it, it goes into the editor, and there's a lot of backwards and forwards with things being changed and, you know, tweaked a bit to sort of fit whatever they think their, you know, buying public is going to want. And then also when you write for children, often there's an illustrator involved, and that person is adding their own level of story to your story, so that's another collaboration. And then, of course, when you've gone through all of that, and it goes out to the public, there's the collaboration with the reader. The story that I think I'm telling isn't necessarily the same as the one you think you're reading. So, yeah, the whole thing is collaborative. I don't think any of it stands alone.
No, and to add to that, I think it's there's several aspects to it, but being somewhere like in Taranaki, where you don't have a huge critical mass of writers, or working with emerging writers and an emerging literary scene in Vanuatu, are three totally different things. So what it does for a writer is it extends you, it challenges you, you take risks that you might not take normally. You work with someone who is in the visual arts or in music, and you are seeing things differently, and then you see how it comes together, which, by the way, there's a National Poetry Day event happening here in Dunedin, which is going to include a lot of different kind of collaboration. And those things are very joyful. And that is what we also need, because we do sit and labor away, beaver away in our own kind of secluded box. But if you work on an essay, you are going to do something very different research-wise and revising, editing-wise than if you work on your very first raw draft manuscript for a creative work like a novel, or if you are in an editing phase with someone who's an editor on the other side of the world talking about every single comma in your poetry collection. There are such different kind of skill sets and mindsets that you need for the creative part and the just plunging ahead versus the editing part. And to then get the joy that comes with having community, meeting face to face, having that interaction and feeling the energy in the room is just amazing. And that's what we also need to fill our cups.
Yeah, when I'm teaching different kinds of people, like yesterday I was teaching some 6 to 11-year-olds at a primary school, you always have to have a specific language to connect to each of the different backgrounds and perspectives of the people you're trying to reach. So it also expands my understanding of what dance is, because it somehow gets more and more simplified the more varied the backgrounds and perspectives are. So for example, for the kids yesterday, I was trying to inspire them about what all could be a dance. And so I was saying, like, this little movement in your hand can be a dance, and then you can put it in your pocket, and you can do your own dance waiting for the bus station. And what I love about dance is that it changes your perspective on the world, so you can look at the world sideways or this way or upside down. And as I was talking to them, they were doing it with me. And in all my classes at the beginning, I often ask the participants, what interests you about movement in your life? So it's not like a dance technique, but it might be something like walking or swimming or even pottery or anything where you have movement that you can reference from. And then the class ends up actually also referencing those things. So each class will be then somehow also halfway improvised, because I'm trying to draw on the things that people have given me in order to expand the practice for the whole room. And I had a sports player in the class once, and I knew that he wasn't like comfortable to be in the setting of the dance class, so I tried to very consciously like create the atmosphere of being in a game and watching where each other is and keeping track of where people are in space. So to kind of also evoke this sense of connectedness, like, oh, I understand this because I've been playing in a field and I know how it is to have to keep track of where everyone is at the same time. And it's not just for that one person, it actually becomes then for the entire group that that becomes like an added information that kind of solidifies your experience in the space and makes everyone feel like a web or a network within that class. That's how I would say.
by way of kind of intermission, or just to take a little break, I've just realised that we have two fellows who we haven't heard from yet, because they have a little video to play. So can I just introduce once again the Frances Hodgkins Fellows, Miranda Bellamy and Amanda Furter, and if we could just play their piece. They have also responded to some of these questions, and in their little introductory piece, speak about some of these things. So I think it's appropriate that we just hear from them. So if you could push play, and we've got a few moments just to meet Amanda and Miranda.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Miranda Bellamy, and this is Amanda Furter.
Thank you all for being here. We've been really looking forward to this event, and of course we wish we could be there with you in person, but we're briefly in Canada to present 2 solo exhibitions. So we're recording this today from the traditional territory of Mi'kma'ki, known as Sackville, New Brunswick, on the East Coast.
Since its genesis in 2019, our collaborative research-based interdisciplinary practice has been underpinned by this idea of listening to plants. The stories that have revealed themselves subsequently have been fascinating, challenging, and stimulating, and they've resulted in a busy few years of developing and presenting exhibitions.
So going back to 2021, we presented an exhibition titled Radiata at Te Tio Kikarangi, the Blue Oyster Art Project Space in Otipoti, and this was our first foray into building relationships with industry, both as a research tool and as a means to realize an exhibition.
On the heels of this exhibition, we presented a Wardian case where we really dug deep into site-specific research in the context of Kawa Island in the Hauraki Gulf, a location that has a very multifaceted botanical history. The resulting 4-channel synchronized video work included a soundscape that was composed in part by the plant's electrical activity. This work has been exhibited several times in various settings and formats since.
Including as part of Terrarium, a solo exhibition at the Owens Art Gallery in New Brunswick in Canada in 2022, where we showcased this piece alongside another existing video work and a series of new sandstone sculptures whose lines are traced through a similar generative process of measuring individual plants' electrical activity. In this case, the plants that are growing on the site of the historic sandstone quarry where the rocks originated.
The same year, we showed Slew Slow Slew as part of the project's initiative at the Aotearoa Art Fair, curated by Michael Doe and commissioned by the Chartwell Trust. This project's point of departure was Queen's Wharf, the venue for the fair, and a site where the stories of the kahikatea tree, the production of butter, and histories of refrigerated shipping are entangled.
In 2023, we continued our collaborative engagement with industry to realize stone moves at Te Atamira in Tahuna, Queenstown. 4 tons of schist were borrowed from a quarry a short distance from the gallery and assembled into sonically activated sculptures that referenced the complex histories and geological processes across deep time and shallow time.
Later in 2023, we presented Collective at the Art Gallery of Grand Prairie in Alberta, Canada. Collective has been a process of accumulation, resulting in a series of portrait-style photographs of trees. These particular trees are from seemingly disparate locations, from the Argyll Peninsula in Scotland to Tuatapere in Western Southland, but all share something in common, which is that they've been marked in some way. The photographs are framed in the wood species that corresponds to the tree in the portrait. For example, a photograph of a maple tree is in a maple frame, and in this way we attempt to close the distance between wood and tree. The works are hung in a Hall of Ancestors style, and this is one of the exhibitions that we're currently presenting in Canada, this time at the Mount St. Vincent University Art Gallery in Kjipuktuk, Halifax, Nova Scotia.
The very first day of our 2024 Frances Hodgkins Fellowship year was marked by opening Signal Echo at the Audio Foundation in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. This 8-channel audio, video, and sculpture exhibition drew lines through seed pods, floorboards, and foghorns, tracing layered stories of vegetal displacement and material consequence. For this piece, we collaborated with Ōtepoti-based woodturner David Large and musician Chris Miller to replicate the sounds of site-specific foghorns from across oceans.
What came next, once we returned to Ōtepoti to settle into our fellowship studio, has been a wonderful and necessary process of clearing our desk proverbially and literally, feeding our practice with all the things it needs to grow and develop in a healthy and sustained way. Being supported by Ōtaka Whakaihu Waka, the University of Otago, in all the ways that we have been, has been impeccable timing after a fully committed few years. The space the fellowship has created to do more reading and research, experiment without pressure, and connect and engage with our wonderful community has been invaluable. We've been going back to the roots of our practice, so to speak, looking again at the language and framing of the plants we call weeds, and unpacking this as we develop new projects.
Another way that we're enjoying and utilizing this time, space, and freedom is by challenging ourselves to learn new tools, technologies, and softwares, developing skills that will continue to serve us long after the fellowship year. For example, we experimented with recontextualizing our 2021 work, A Wardian Case, into an augmented reality world that's experienced by our audience through a VR headset. We had the opportunity to share this piece as part of the group exhibition, The Chronicle of a New Love Order, on the invitation of curatorial collective The Chronicle of. This exhibition was alongside the Aotearoa Digital Arts Symposium in Te Whanganui-a-Tara, Wellington, which was a really valuable invitation to consider the many ways that AI interacts with us as artists. And we've also been teaching ourselves 3D scanning, modeling, and animation.
We've been thinking about the many ways that botanical knowledge is built and shared. Through our engagement with the botany department, we were introduced to their collection of Brendel botanical models. These are teaching tools that were made in Berlin by the Brendel Company in the late 1800s and early 1900s. These models are our current research focus and the source material for our new solo exhibition, Radicant, which will be exhibited at YYZ Artists Outlet, a project space in Toronto in a few weeks' time. For this work, we're collaborating with poet, musician, and artist Colleen Coco Collins, who lives here in Mi'kma'ki. Coco has been writing poems in response to each plant model and the plant that it represents, tracing long threads of interconnected stories.
Last month, the hardcover catalogue for Terrarium was published by the Owens Art Gallery, and this is our first hardcover publication. It contains incredibly thoughtful texts by Emily Falvey and Bruce E. Phillips. We're excited to share that we now have the opportunity, thanks to some support from the New Brunswick Arts Board, to self-publish an artist book for our project collective with texts by Emily Jan and Jessica Groom. We're hoping to bring a suitcase back full of both of these publications to share with you all when we return next month.
We look forward to returning to our studio soon, and when we do, we'll be expanding the 3D scanning animation work that has informed Radicant and continue on with a local industry collaboration that we're really excited about. And just generally getting our hands dirty, making new works towards our fellowship outcome exhibition at Ware Taoka o Hakuna, the Hocken Gallery. Save the date for February 14th, 2025. We would love to see you all there. And please feel free to reach out to us if you've got any questions about us or our work. Our contact details should be pretty readily available to find online. Thank you to Ōtaka Whakaihu Waka, the University of Otago, and the Dunedin Public Art Gallery for hosting us here this morning. Ka mihi nui and congratulations to the other fellows.
So thank you to Amanda and Miranda for putting that little presentation together amidst a busy time for them over in Canada. So if we could just jump back into our conversation. The last little bit of dialogue that we were having was about the input of others in your practice. And I'm interested to kind of extend that a little bit and talk about place. Creative residency programs establish the opportunity for a two-way relationship between creative practitioner and a new environment. So my question is, how do you think being in Ōtepoti has affected your outputs, of late? And I guess, how do you think they might, they might stay with you into the future?
Being back in a university environment, which is where I grew up because my father was a professor of ceramic engineering, the science side, at Alfred University in the States. Being back in a university environment has been really feeling like kind of a home, and also just because of the interdisciplinary nature of having all different kinds of people invested in different fields of study and knowledge. And it's also just reminded me so much of how dance holds all these kind of other disciplines within them, or it can connect to all other kinds of disciplines. For me, dance, of course, makes me feel good, and I release energy and makes me happy to move, and other people in my classes have similar experiences that they feel good afterwards. But for me, it goes beyond just the movement part. I also want to inspire people to see elements of dance as science and also elements of dance as art, and to really find access to that, to be able to perceive that in how they move, and also how movement creates new neural connections in your mind and the way of perceiving reality, because when we change how we perceive reality, we also act different, and that creates then physical changes that just reverberate out. And specifically being in Ōtepoti, Dunedin, has been very inspiring because I was really obsessed, and I still am very obsessed with octopus. And I've been listening on repeat to this beautiful book about octopus called Other Minds, by Peter Godfrey Smith from Australia. And I've just had the chance, for example, to go to the Marine Science Department and teach the whole staff there a movement workshop about pushing and pulling, and realizing how the whole body starts to be more decentralized, not like only thinking of what movement you want to do ahead of time in your head, but just like allowing all different parts of your body to make decisions. And this very much relates to octopus, because that's how their nervous system is rearranged. It's a very decentralized animal. And I think that by doing different kind of movement practices and engaging in that, we're also able to change the way that we interact with people around us. And I think that there's just a lot of unexplored potential that working with the body, connection to mind, still has to offer, and it's often forgotten, this other kind of knowledge, of embodied knowledge. And so that's one of the things that I want to try to connect more and more while I'm here in the more university environment, is that it's not just about dances being something beautiful and fun to do, but also that it has a lot to offer to all other fields of study. So that's where my inspiration comes from, being actually in the university environment. Yeah, and if anyone else likes octopus, please let me know. Not to eat, though.
For me, Ōtepoti is very steeped in memory. Actually, so I lived here until a bit after my 5th birthday, and now my parents live here after having been away for a very long time, and so for me there's very much a sense of looking backwards and recovering things, because since I lived here, I'm sorry to say I didn't really make it back very much, so it's really a case of rediscovering the place. Everything that's here, and it sort of encourages you to really, you sort of sink down, you go deeper and deeper and deeper, and then sometimes, when you move sideways, you just sort of, go further into memory. So in terms of my work, I'm a little slow, so sometimes, things don't influence my work until later. So I know it's definitely going to influence my work probably next year, but definitely in terms of what I'm working on, it's often a memory that I'm working with rather than what's happening at that present moment, because I think I need to process things and it takes a while. But yeah, definitely it's having a huge influence being here, and it will continue to do so into the future.
I grew up just up the road in Temuka, and my mum's one of 14 and my dad's one of 7, so I've got aunties and uncles and cousins for Africa. I spent a lot of my childhood visiting here, but this is the first time that I've ever lived here, even though it's temporary. I've always felt sort of vaguely displaced up north, even though I've spent most of my life there. It's not that people are so different, but down here I sort of feel like I'm with people who sort of see the world, or approach the world's probably a better way to say that actually, approach the world in a way that's more similar to how I was brought up to approach it, you know, having genuine conversations with random strangers on the street and all that sort of thing. I made a conscious decision that the place was going to affect this particular piece of work that I was doing down here. So I set my novel in Dunedin, and one of my main characters has just moved down, just like I did. And so through that, I get to say a lot of things from the point of view of someone who's not embedded here, but, you know, is having an experience of living here. And this particular character is only living here temporarily as well. So it's really affected it in that way. But the other thing that's really affected it is the cross-pollination that you get down here. I found that all of the different people I've met in different situations are so interconnected in a way that's not true, or not as true in Hamilton. We have quite a strong sort of literary scene, but it's a little bit more siloed. And I just love the way that when you go to something that's a little bit left field from what you're doing yourself, you know, it impacts the way you see things. So it's given me new ways of thinking, new ways of approaching things just by virtue of being in a new place. I always find it a really creative thing to do, to just go to a new place and just wander around rather than doing all the, you know, the big tourist things. I've done those as well, but the main thing has just been wandering around and being part of the city.
Well, I'm not at all as disciplined as you guys. I've just embraced every opportunity I have to get out and about. And I have to say, there's a wonderful poetry scene here. And we don't have that kind of a strong literary scene in Taranaki. We have the strong music scene and the visual arts. But I've so enjoyed, shout out to Octagon Poetry Collective, National Flash Fiction events, all of these things, also going a bit wider, having excursions to Queenstown, doing writing workshops here and there. And yeah, I think it's very valuable. And I'm also getting asked to do lectures and presentations with different academic circles, so those in the Peace and Research Institution, those in the Pacific Talanoa Network, but also the English department. And of course you go into the library and you take out one book. Well, you know, a library is a community in itself. You go there and you are supposed to go for that one book, and then next to that book there happens to be, and then you look above and, you know, suddenly you come out with a whole stack. And I've discovered that we don't get any late fees, guys. Interloan. And so, yeah, I'm just enjoying it. And I'm also finding new ways of doing things, which will be very useful. And then we have City of Literature here. And I see we have a wonderful honorary consul of Finland here, who I didn't know existed in Dunedin. And the City of Literature Dunedin has a sister city in Finland, right on the border to Russia, where actually my first published short story was set there, and I didn't even know. Kuhmo, my uncle was a principal 40 case from Kuhmo for 20 years. So maybe this is a way of getting back to Finland via Dunedin. So who knows? You know, things move in various circles, and you just have to embrace some of those opportunities, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the clock behind me, and we're starting to run out of time. And none of you have had the opportunity to ask any questions. So this is that opportunity. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to pose to our fellows?
Thank you. I would be very interested to ask the two writers, but it may apply to Simon as well, about any issues in relation to publication of your work. I don't think you mentioned, you might have mentioned it, forgive me if I missed it, but I mean, if you're a writer or a composer, I guess you've got to publish. How easy or how difficult has it been for the three of you? And maybe dancers publish too, but it seems obvious to ask the writers and musicians first.
Well, if I should start, I think it's becoming trickier and trickier. So in the past 2 years, I've had super enthusiastic editors who have said, yes, we need to publish this, only for it to fall over again. And I think this is the reality for very many writers. But the day I arrived here in Dunedin on 5th of February, I got a huge literary award in Finland, and then I got interested in translating my work into English. And so, you know, you are taken off on a tangent to do things that you didn't plan to do, but maybe in the hope that it will lead somewhere. But I think we all work with having several works out in the same, in the same space, going different places. And of course, no publisher wants to have simultaneous submissions either. So the problem for a writer is that you are very excited about your work, and after a while, you fall out of love with it. And so if no one is there to take up, what are you going to do? Well, usually I work as a podcaster at the radio, and other kind of bitsy pieces don't have enough time to do my work. But I don't have that extra money to pay for every step of the way and the publishing at the end. And at the end of the day, the publishers make money from our books. You know, the normal kind of division of profit is 10% to the writer, 90% to the publisher to cover their costs. It's a very tiny paycheck at the end of the day. And now there are hybrid models, but it requires you to pay into it, you get a bigger share, or you self-publish, but then you end up with the problem of distributing all your work. You know, and that's not an easy task either. And there's some very skillful people who do all of that, but you know, there's enough marketing and communication in my life to last a lifetime, and actually I would have like to have less. Yeah, it's a tricky question.
I started writing in a much more analogue time, but I still kind of do the digital version of this now. I mean, I just write what I write, and then, unless it's been commissioned, of course, and then you're guaranteed a publication. And then I look for things around that are a similar sort of thing, and I think, well, that company might be interested in this too. And then back in the day, I would have just looked on the inside cover and got the address and sent it in. But for me, once it's written, I kind of think I'm done. I would sort of have a list of 5 or 6 different places that I thought might take it, and my theory is that one will reject it because your usual experience is that it's rejected. Then I send it to this one. And if I run out of places, I start again and send it back to the first one again. And that's worked out really well for me. You know, I think I'm at about 262 published pieces now. So, but it's just from doing that. But it's not a thing that's going to make me rich, because I haven't worried too much about trying to be published overseas or anything. A lot of my stuff's gone overseas, but it's happened very organically. And I find once you've got things out, then people will ask you to do things as well. And I haven't been one of the people who's joined things you're supposed to join and knows about things you're supposed to know about and, you know, goes out and makes things happen. I'm just the person who said yes to stuff that's happened to me, kind of thing. So even applying for this was outside my wheelhouse. I don't normally do that sort of thing. But yeah, my plan for it has just been plug away.
Yeah, much the same. Plug away. In my case, it's mostly self-published, and of course for music you have different forms of publishing. You have the publishing of the sound recording, as well as the publishing of the work itself, which might be in a score, it might not. I think musicians are quite lucky in the sense that, well, particularly if you're composing in a medium that uses performers as opposed to, say, electronic media. We're very lucky that we have performers, in a sense. So we have this partner that can take a piece and they can run with it, you know. So I've had pieces that I've written for people, and it says it's got their name on the score and everything for so and so, which is a really great thing to do as a composer, because it's like you're giving someone a gift. It's really special, and then they take it around the place. So I've had a few pieces that I've written for people, and they've quite liked it, and they've taken it around various countries. Or I've had other pieces that have just sort of been picked up. I had one that randomly, a video of it ended up on like a Russian Facebook feed and went sort of semi-viral, but I think all the comments were kind of a little bit snarky. But that's good. It's getting good publicity is you know, bad publicity is good publicity. So that's yeah. I mean, it's a lot of different things, but for me, it's mostly been digital forms and kind of self-driven.
Yeah, through researching a little bit about possible postgraduate studies, I've now found out that performances are actually considered publications, which is really great. So anytime I decide to publish a dance, it's a publication. So I thought it's also a lot about the fact that I decide to frame that moment as a dance. So I have these little cards right here that I've made for my project, which, as you can see, has a little hole in it. And you can look through it, and then you can move it far away or zoom in on something, or you can kind of decide anything you want can be a dance. So I thought, since I've seen that all of us have been moving a little bit here and there for the last hour that we've been here, all of that movement we could consider as a dance. And what I thought is that we could just spend exactly 1 minute and we could publish a dance right here, create our own dance performance. So you don't really have to do anything because you actually can't stop moving. It's impossible. So you're kind of trapped in the fact that anything you do is a dance. So you might as well have fun with it and feel free about what you do. Yeah, let's see what happens. I'm going to just start this dance right now, and it's going to be 60 seconds where we can just communicate by movement.
I don't think that's our scene.
No, but we've certainly hit it.
Absolutely,
Forward,
absolutely.
That's quite right. You have to keep
Absolutely
moving.
true, yeah. Absolutely. I can't sit still. Oh my goodness, she's crawling over there. I think yes.
Well done, everyone.
So yes, I have a question. What, if any, effect is the environment and character of Dunedin having on the work you're doing here, producing here?
Well, I can start by saying that I didn't intend to write any poetry, and I probably performed more poetry than I have in my entire 7 years in Taranaki here. And I'm also being asked to write things, and that's very lovely. So I do think it will have an unexpected influence. And I also confess that I thought Otago was the land of tussock mountains, and I discovered it's coastal as well. So I feel really sheepish about the fact that I didn't realize quite how coastal it is. And of course, I'm a sea person, so I absolutely adore it. So I think Otepoti is going to have a much bigger impact on my work than I thought, from that perspective as well.
It's been interesting for me revisiting places that I went to a lot as a kid. So my nan is from Macraes. We went there lots as kids. I can remember whinging on the way, but I had no idea it was up. I don't remember that from being a kid. It's just been interesting seeing things that I saw as a kid through adult eyes. And I think the weather here is probably affecting too some of the things I've written, because there's just things that we don't experience so much in Hamilton. Like your wind has needles in it. You know, that doesn't happen at home. I think it's colder half the time in Hamilton than it is here. My husband defrosts the car most days, and down here I think we've only had 3 or 4 since I've been here. But it's a different kind of cold, and it's a sort of a very sort of open, fresh sort of weather, and also quite grey. So those two things are kind of, you know, contradictory. Hamilton, the cold is in your bones and it's kind of damp, and in summer the heat's in your brain, you know, because it's very muggy. But we get a lot more blue. And I've been writing a bit of poetry since I've been down here too, and it's interesting to me how much of that is seeped in. But it'll be really interesting to see what comes out in the next few years, because I think things take a while to percolate.
I think definitely meeting the people has been a huge part of my work here. Not only musicians and artists and writers and dancers and things in the area, but also just the other fellows, just meeting them and just talking about art is having a huge effect. One of the really striking things about Otepoti in particular is kind of realizing with Aotearoa being such a long country, how different just the light is, you know, from Wellington or Auckland to here. It's, you know, at the sunset it's very low, and it kind of changes everything. And then all of these kind of old buildings just make it feel like it's so rooted. And I don't know how that's impacting my work yet, but I mean it has to, you know, it's how life is. So yeah.
I think like a little bit what you said, I think meeting the people has been really impactful on the work. New Zealand people in general, but also particularly also people here in Dunedin, and it just ranges from being able to talk to the bus driver about my project, and he's just like very open. So there's a kind of an openness, and not assuming anything, then I just feel it's very easy to talk about the project and what I'm trying to do with it, and people are like, oh yeah, interesting, I think I see what you mean, rather than somehow blocking it out, which tends to sometimes happen in Europe, because people have also a very preconceived idea of what things might or might not be, so that there's just this very amazing sense of openness for experimentation and new ideas. And not every conversation goes super deep, but I definitely feel that there's a possibility to go somewhere with each person I've met so far. So it's been pretty amazing.
And actually, I'd just like to add something to that, because I expected you all to be open and friendly to me, because that's what I grew up with. But I've been really blown away by the wraparound sort of welcome that I've received, not just in the university, but just from people in general in the community who've emailed out of the blue and said, hey, come round for dinner, let's do this, or, you know, do you want to go to the DSO? There's just been so many opportunities. I've been to so many different things just because people have asked me, and all of that will go into the work and affect things as well. And the other thing that I hadn't thought of until you were talking was the way people talk has affected things. One of the things I noticed when I came down here, I was saying to them at lunch, is that quite often in shops when you ask someone something, they'll say, easy. Now, that's not something that anyone ever says in Hamilton, but that's something I've caught myself saying now. And how I talk is how I write. So, I mean, I know it's going to show up somewhere. So if you read something of mine and it's got easy in it, you'll know where it came from.
Does anyone have any further questions?
I'd like to know how having the chance to do full-time arts practice has enriched your personal health and well-being as artists.
Well, I can say that it's been amazing. It does increase your health and well-being in just that to have a year of no financial struggles, not having to constantly wonder where the next paycheck is coming from or how to put your kids through school. That is amazing. Having said that, I'm separated from my family this year because my kids are still at secondary school and they didn't want to leave their basketball team and their friends and stuff. So they are back in Taranaki. But I have a daughter who is here at Otago Uni. So I do think it's important for the health and well-being of any creative person, but I actually think any person in New Zealand. You need to have a break every now and then and not have to fret about your family's well-being. Because if I'm well, I can look after my family. If I'm not, then that one falls over too. So it's a bit of a domino effect. But to nurture my creativity and feel that I'm validated by just being here and being able to connect with the community, being one in the community and doing my creativity, and they actually seem to respond to it, that gives something back to me and makes me stronger. Yes, it has been a joyful year. Thank you, Otepoti.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. The health and well-being thing is probably a bit more of a double-edged sword for me. I spent the first month not sleeping because I'm not used to sleeping without Sione, and he's back in Hamilton. But, you know, there are video calls, he's been down, I've been up, all that sort of thing. But creatively-wise, it's been amazing just to have the opportunity where it's okay to play and experiment and try new things. I don't have to worry about being paid for it because I'm already being paid. Yeah, that's been absolutely massive. It's made a really big difference. And the other thing that's made a big difference, as Michaela was just saying, is the validation. At home, people know I'm at home. When you're at home, you're available. And it's not that they don't think writing is a real thing, but I don't know when they think I do it because they bring me to do all sorts of other things, whereas down here, I'm here being a writer. And so, yeah, it's not only the recognition that you are a writer, but that people think that, you know, you're doing something worthwhile, and so they're prepared to leave you in your office for a little while to do it. So I've really enjoyed it. I mean, this has probably been one of the most amazing opportunities I've ever had. The only thing that could have made it better would have been if Sione could have come too, but he couldn't leave his job. But yeah, I've really, really valued it. So yeah, thank you to everybody.
Yeah, I'd like to just tautoko both of those points. Yeah, there's always kind of a bit of a contradiction, I think, with artists that, you know, art itself and the process of making art is so good for your mental health, but the struggles of a freelance career are very bad for your mental health. So there's this kind of kind of seesaw that artists often have to go through, and so. Just having the stability that this position offers has been a real godsend to experiment and to also, kind of, think about aspects of physical health as well. I've thought about going to the gym. Haven't been yet, but yeah. So it's very positive, I think, for health in general.
I'm thinking a lot about how we divide things in our life and the idea that there's the artistic part and then there's the practical part and then there's the family part. And for me, that doesn't really work so well. I find that these things often mix and blend up through each other. And so somehow, in order to keep working, when, for example, I have to take care of my family, I try to really also see how there's these artistic ways of doing that and sources to get out of from being responsible for many things at the same time. There's one other thing I wanted to say about that, but now it skipped my mind. Self-production. Dance requires from the people that are engaged in the field an enormous amount of self-production. So even though I have the support of a 6-month salary and the project is 6 months long, I'm spending probably, I would say, probably 75% of the time on my computer, doing like promotion, writing back to emails, connecting to various people in the community, designing these posts, these things. This takes like a week of time sometimes to get it just right. Also thinking about where do I put up posters, who's gonna do that, is there somebody who's can help me with that? Like, I don't know, just like there's not a structure that's set up for me to just go and do my art in, because I have to create the community first, which is like a marketing campaign, and it's on one person, of course, with the support of other networks, like I mentioned Anna already, so thank you again, Anna. But so that it's like the amount of time that you spend on the actual creative moment, like in the dance class, is then the most minimal amount of time, and it would be amazing if that could be 50% of the time or even 90% of the time. But for most dance artists, it's a lot about self-production and being like your own marketing company in order to actually create the network that you then use to work together in. And so, yes, it's been very supportive, like more than any other situation I've been in, to have this fellowship, and I'm really grateful for it. But I just also want to say that even with support, most of the artists and the dancers are self-producing everything and don't have a company to do that. So it's just good to. Thank you.
We've probably got time for one last question, if anyone has it. Otherwise, I'll just dance back to my seat. Easy. Okay, we'll give you one more.
Since no one else came up with anything, I would like to know how this year will impact your long-term art practice.
Well, I think Marcella touched on it. We are all actually self-producing things and supporting other people and communities as well, whether it's through Society of Authors networks or working with the people in the Pacific. A huge amount of time goes to promotion and putting up press releases, doing judges' reports, whatever, and most of it is not paid. But this year I've been able to put out a couple of manuscripts because I've had the time to look at them, and also put in things I wouldn't necessarily put in, like for 2 competitions. I never enter competitions, or to a couple of anthologies, and I've been asked to put out work. So what that means is that I'm actually looking at a pipeline of things coming out. So there's a novel that has New Zealand connections that is just being taken up in Finland. There might be a new English novel coming out here. Then there might also be translation work. All of that takes a lot of time. And so to be able to put things in the pipeline means that it looks like you have several years worth of work. But, you know, you need to be ahead. And you need to plug them in, and as Feyana was saying before, you don't know what is being taken or if something falls over, and you have to start again from scratch. So it's very important for every one of us who's kind of an active professional artist to be able to show that we have work in the pipeline, otherwise we don't get new opportunities, and it's kind of like this domino effect, catch-22.
Yeah, I've never self-published or anything. I only publish usually through traditional publishers and educational publishers. But my entire career has just been an organic thing that's kind of started because I wanted my kids to see themselves in books. I mean, they're all adults now. But even with things that have happened here, so I've done a lot of presentations down here, and people who know me will know I hate being in front of people. But I do one, and then 2 or 3 people are there who see it, who think, oh, this might work for us, and suddenly I'm doing something that's not quite the same, but it's a little bit different, that's come from that one thing. And writing's exactly the same. You know, you write an article for this, and then somebody else is like, oh, I didn't know you were doing that, you know, can you do this sort of thing for me as well? And so it's really hard to say how this is going to affect what's coming, because it just goes out in lots of different directions, and I don't know which directions it's going to come out in. But I've already, made lots of different sort of mini networks down here. I've been asked if I can come and take part in things that probably people wouldn't have thought of, you know, including me and before, just because they didn't know me, because I tend to stay in a room on my own. I think you never know what the ripples of these things are. I mean, a couple of years ago, I was writer in residence at Massey University, and Michaela was the year before me, and things are still rippling for me from that one, let alone from this one. So you don't know what's going to happen.
Much the same, really. It's just a question of momentum. You know, momentum is so important to gather, and it's very easy to lose and hard to get back again. So, critical mass, all that kind of thing.
For myself, I think it's just opened up my ideas of who and how many different kinds of people I can work with also in the future. So just interests in working with more diverse groups of people than I have in my past, and I'm really being now much more comfortable with that as well. And in terms of for the future, like the more immediate future, I just wanted to let you know that there's going to be a performance on the 7th and 8th of September in the new Athenaeum Theatre, which is just across the street. It's a small space. There will be 24 performers, all very diverse, and they're not professional dancers, most of them. They're just people who enjoy movement in various ways. And I'm still also looking for about 8 more participants. So if you know someone in your life that you feel would enjoy and benefit from being on stage in a community of performances, we're all going to do little solos. Please let me know. And I also have brought many more of these little cards right here, these little frames for making your own dances, which I am going to pass around so each one of you can take one home. And there's my address on the back that you can check out a little bit more about the project or get in touch if you're interested for me to come give a dance workshop or anything else in the next 2 months that I'm here. I'm very happy to have a coffee and talk about movement, how it relates with what you're interested in. So I'm just going to kind of informal, can I do that? Pass them around while you continue? Yeah? Okay.
And while Marcelo is doing that, I might just draw us to a close by just acknowledging all of the fellows and one by one, Michaela Nyman, the Robbie Burns Fellow, Fiona Tuakoi, the University of Otago, College of Education, Creative New Zealand, Children's Writer in Residence, Dr. Simon Eastwood, the Mozart Fellow, and out in the audience, Marcella Geisha, the Carolyn Plummer Fellow in Community Dance. Would you just join me in a round of applause to show our appreciation? Thank you so much. Now, I believe that we have a cup of tea, coffee, and maybe a slice of cake or something outside the auditorium. So please stick around, continue the conversation, and thank you all again for coming. Kia ora.